As hot rodders, we typically live in our own box. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're a Ford guy, you typically just mess with Ford engines. Chevrolet, Chrysler, it's all the same. We pretty much live in our own environment, and we never really get a chance to explore the other brands. Unless you're an automotive machine shop, you typically don't have Ford, Chevrolet, and Mopar blocks in the shop. You know, it just doesn't happen. But today we have a special opportunity, is going to be comparing the small blocks from Ford, Chrysler, and GM, or Chevrolet rather. What do you think, David?
We're all set to go here, and I think the first thing, Andy, is to show them the block and then give them a rundown on the weight. Right, we've got this block here at 160. Right, I was surprised that it weighed that little.
Yeah.
The Ford 127, and the Chevrolet with the caps on is 172.
That is crazy.
It is, and as Andy pointed out, the Chevrolet block is only 9 inches deck, whereas the Chrysler block is 9.5 something. Right, now I can understand the Ford being lighter than the Chrysler block because it's only an 8.2 deck. It's a whole inch and something shorter. But why is the Chevrolet block so heavy compared with the Chrysler block? Well, we're just going through to measure the stuff up. Now, a brief inspection of the Chrysler block reveals that they're pretty stout here, and this is a place where under high RPM and a lot of horsepower, blocks can break. Now, that's a pretty respectable thickness there. It's thicker than the Ford one.
Oh, absolutely.
But the Ford blocks don't necessarily break here. They may break a mains cap, right, or they split down the middle. But this block here, the stock block, is limited to about 500 and a little bit over 500 horsepower. We have heard of these blocks with the boost on going a lot more than that. So the block in this case looks pretty good. Now if we go and look at the Chevrolet block, right, here's what we, as a factory deal, here's our prime choice, right, 4-bolt block. But better yet is to get a 2-bolt block and put the splay caps in it. See, we've got the angled bolt holes, because these splay caps keep the block from moving like this. Now, interestingly enough, see, that's not an 010 block. Now look at this, 010, 020. Now, I was told by one of my friends at GM Performance that this meant 1% nickel and 2% chrome. Or it might have been around the other way, but I'm pretty sure it was 1% nickel, 2% chrome, right? So, this is what I've been led to believe, but now I'm hearing things to the contrary, right? So, still more coming in on that. Let's hear what everybody else has to say. Now, if you've got a Ford, a small block Ford, to handle much more than 500 horsepower, you're going to have to do something serious. Now, this is a serious modification here. These are the caps which peg the block so that it cannot move that way or that way. I don't know if you can see that there. These are done by Checkered Flag. I'll put the address across the bottom. And this block here, well, not this one, but this block modified in this manner has gone up to 1,000 horsepower without braking. Now, they've lasted 800 horsepower for a couple of seasons on the drag strip for a turbo motor. So I'm thinking that it's pretty good. But as good as it is, that block over there, this block here, can handle way more than 500 horsepower just as it is, right? So this is one of the reasons why I think we should consider Chrysler blocks or Chrysler-based builds more often than we do. Still on the theme of the Chrysler being a pretty stout piece, look at this rod here. Now, I don't have a small block Chevy one to compare it with, but it's a long rod. It's almost as beefy as a big block Chevy rod, which is nigh on indestructible. Now, it's carrying quite a bit of weight, so we can take a lot off and still have a rod that will take a lot of RPM and a lot of horsepower. Piston, stock one's too heavy. Oh, and the other thing that's of importance is it's a floating pin in the rod. So that's good. We don't have to do anything, and there's no wear on these. These are Tony's rods, by the way, for our project. So these rods here, we may have the big end here reconditioned, but outside of that, nothing, right? But I am going to lighten them all up and make them look real pretty. You know, Andy raised a good point here. Why isn't the Chrysler more popular? Well, it's simple. But I'll let him explain that, right? Because he'll run right through it like a knife through butter.
So when you're talking about performance and availability and popularity, it's a pretty big subject. We know that the small block Chevy became the performance darling. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I have a theory as to why that came to be. You're looking at architecture that was originated in 1955. Okay, so let's go over here to the Ford. The 260 cubic inch Ford, or 221 rather, came out in 1962. Okay, so it is 7 years behind the small block Chevy. And then when we get to the Chrysler here, the LA Chrysler, that was introduced in 1964 as a 273 cubic inch engine. So as you can see, the availability of these engines, later you had a surplus of these small block Chevys in the junkyard that didn't exist for Ford and Chrysler. So Chevrolet automatically had a head start on the game. And thinking about 1964, that debuted as a 273 cubic inch engine, whereas in the small block Chevy, by that time, you already had a 327 cubic inch engine. So which one would you build? So as you can see, there's big differences in the engine designs itself. Probably number one question I'll get is, why am I comparing an 8.2 deck small block Ford in comparison to the Chrysler and Chevy? Well, first of all, it's what we have here at the shop of DVs is a 289 and a 302 block here, and it's closest to size cubic inch wise to the 318. Now the 351 Windsor is pretty comparable to the 360 Chrysler, and if I had one here I would show it to you. But let's talk about the Chrysler. Like I said, the LA Chrysler originated in 1964 as a 273 cubic inch engine, and then in 1967 it grew to 318 cubic inches, and then later 340 and 360 to 9.58 inch deck height. The 273, 318, and 340 all use the same stroke crankshaft, a 3.31 inch stroke, with the only exception of being the 360, which uses a 3.58 inch stroke. Looking here at the different Ford blocks, like I said, this is an 8.2 deck. This is actually a C5 casting block, which makes this a 289, and this is a F1 casting, later model roller 5.0 block. The Chevrolet block here, this is actually a 350 block, factory 4-bolt mains, and you can see this is the 2-bolt block started out and has been added to have the splayed caps. This is actually a 400 block. The Chevrolet blocks have a 9.06 deck height. And if you're wondering what deck height is, if you were to draw a line from this surface here to the center line of the crankshaft, you would be at 9.06 inches. I think one of the reasons why the Chevy block is heavier than the Chrysler is based off of what I've measured here. For the most part, it's thicker in the main webbing, with exception in this part right here. And I don't know if you can see it, but it gets pretty thin on the back side there. Coming over to the Ford, you'll notice some differences right away. The bottom of the cylinder bores themselves is not really supported by the casting itself. You can see how it's a skirt on the bottom here, whereas the Chryslers have this flat bottom right here. Now, one thing that DV and I have seen over the years is if you take and put a chamfer on the bottom side of this bore, it will actually aid in airflow flowing back up the piston, behind the piston, as the piston goes back up the top dead center, making slightly more power. We have taken these blocks and filled them in the bottom down here to come even with the bottom of the cylinder bores. So there's a lot of differences, but just wanted to show you the big differences in them. Like I said, the small block Chevy comes out on top as far as weight, being the heaviest. The Chrysler coming in at number 2. And of course, this is a lightweight. And if it was a 351 Windsor, I think that it would be on par with the Chrysler. But that might be a video for another day. I know that there's a lot of differences in the architecture of the engines themselves. And this is not meant to be an all-inclusive type video. It's just to show you differences in the architecture, some of the strengths and weaknesses of the factory designs, because Greg Brown of Hammerhead Performance Engines told me a while back, he said, Andy, he said, the problem is not getting these engines to make power anymore. It's actually getting them to live. So pretty much in this day and time, we can make enough power to destroy any one of these blocks sitting here. So you can kind of see where things are at. It's all about keeping the horsepower inside the block. We hope you liked this video. It was fun being with DV here again. And until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports. David Vizard here. We will catch you later. Say catch you later.
Catch you later.